Josef von Brauchitsch geistesgegenwärtig aus dem Wagen. Siemen fährt um die Brandstelle herum, wieder ins Rennen. Die Ereignisse und Zwischenfälle jagen einander in den letzten Runden. Räumer, der gut gefahren ist, muss aufgeben. Ferrari, der an dritter Stelle lag, mit der Schienen entlang, muss kurz vor Schluss noch einmal halten. Hans Stuck ist jetzt an dritter Stelle. Siemen, der junge Engländer, siegt in einem dramatischen Rennen. Es ist sein erster großer Erfolg auf Mercedes-Benz. Hermann Lang, der Tripoli-Sieger, ist Zweiter. Hans Stuck hat den Auto-Union-Wagen auf einen ehrenvollen dritten Platz gebracht.
In 1938, a new formula was introduced. For the first time, there were separate classes for supercharged and naturally aspirated engines. Since the contract with Porsche had not been renewed at the end of 1937, Eberan Eberhorst was now responsible for design work. He designed a 12-cylinder engine whose blocks were aligned at an angle of 60 degrees. 3 camshafts, in contrast to only 1 in the past, were now used for valve control. This made the engine more complex but increased its speed. The 3-litre supercharged-engined car weighed 850 kilograms, excluding water, oil, fuel and the driver. A striking new feature of the chassis was the rear axle. The car now had a so-called de Dion axle, which combined a rigid axle tube with 2 drive shafts. The fuel tank was no longer situated at the rear, but positioned by the side of the driver. This reduced the size of the car by 17 centimeters, and the driver no longer had to sit so far forward, but more in the center of the car. In the course of the season, the Auto Union team once again demonstrated that rare ability of making something out of a seemingly hopeless situation and fighting its way to the front. After the death of Bernd Rosemeyer, all hopes rested on the Italian champion driver Tazio Nuvolari. During the Swiss Grand Prix in the previous year, he was to contest a race for the Auto Union team, but then sportingly handed over his car to Rosemeyer when the latter had to drop out for technical problems. We must thank the former European Kodak representative, George Monkhouse, for this rare original colour film. In autumn, Tazio Nuvolari won the Italian Grand Prix in Monza and the race in Donington for the 4 rings. The race, which was held on the almost unchanged, bumpy, twisty circuit, did not pass without incident when one of the competitors lost some oil. It turned out to be Tazio Nuvolari's day. He took the lead after it had changed several times in the race, and he held the number 1 spot impressively right to the checkered flag without being challenged. In the last year of racing, 1939, the team was strengthened by 2 up-and-coming drivers. Ulrich Bigalke, who until then had accompanied Auto Union during its race with a cinefilm camera and who was responsible for many of these eventful visual shots, and Schorsch Meyer, one of the most popular motorcycle racers in Germany at that time. I think Auto Union tested 8 or 10 drivers at the Nürburgring racing circuit over a period of a few months. I remember the date exactly. It was November the 8th, 1938, when I drove a racing car for the first time at the Nürburgring. They took our overall times, split times, etc. I was the fastest of all the new drivers, and Auto Union said that I was the man for their team. Although my racing car was on fire, they pulled me out. But I soon got back in again, and I had burns everywhere, but I still managed to finish in second place. Auto Union once again staked its claim to the role of victor with the double triumph at the French Grand Prix in Rouen, where Meyer finished runner-up behind H.P. Müller. Here is one of the few examples of the D model in the United Kingdom which survived the turmoil of the times. The model represents the last development stage of the now legendary racing car. The engine power was increased once again for the 1939 season. It had a double supercharger for even better cylinder charging, as well as an anti-friction bearing crankshaft. The result was an increase in engine power to approximately 500 horsepower, which almost represented the level at which engines with double the capacity had reached their power limits barely 2 years before. Equipped with these innovations, Tazio Nuvolari turned the final race by supercharged racing cars on the 3rd of September 1939 into a victory for Auto Union. This was the last race in which the Silver Arrows took part. From that day on, they became part of history. The races of that period are now history, but they still represent important memories for us and are actually much more than a legend. In the museum, visitors can admire the racing cars from that period as masterpieces of science and technology. However, the people who designed, built, and drove these masterpieces also deserve our respect. They also accomplished these outstanding exploits. Both belong together, and this is still true today. These cars have therefore become memorials, which have kept their charm, especially when you see them on the road again, producing that surprisingly rich, throaty sound which generates excitement just like in the past. The son takes over from his father, who contributed to the glorious years of the Four Rings by sporting victories. In 1990, Audi returned to the German racing circuits, which have a long tradition. Hans-Joachim Stuck won the German Touring Car Championship in 1990 in an Audi V8 Quattro, whilst Frank Bieler was the winner in 1991. They therefore followed on from the legendary successes of Hans Stuck and Bernd Rosemeyer in the Auto Union racing cars. It's just been brought home to me even more what heroes these past drivers were. The cars had no power steering, no power-assisted brakes, precarious road holding, and an unbelievable amount of power. At times, the drivers couldn't drive flat out until third gear, as a result of the poor tyres on the car and due to the lack of safety precautions, roll bars, and proper helmets. Moreover, there were no doctors, cooling jackets, or mineral drinks. But the drivers still covered distances of 500 kilometers on the Nürburgring. But it's impossible to make comparisons, just like you can't land a jumbo jet on a grass landing strip today. The advances that were made then were enormous. My father must surely have thought at that time that they couldn't make much more progress. Although we still think the same way today, progress will continue to be made. In 1992, 53 years after the last victory by the Auto Union Silver Arrows, the Audi V8 Quattro once again appear in their silver livery. They combine the continuity and tradition of a great motorsport history in the symbol of the four rings.